massive surplus that they take and they spend on their military. Well, we don't want that. I don't want them to take $500, $600 billion a year and spend it on their military. I don't want them spending money on their military.
Because they are the worst offenders in the international trading system. They have the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world. And I can tell you that this escalation is a loser for them. That they have some very smart, the economists, the academicians, technocrats within their bureaucracy, and they would be telling the leadership that we do not have the edge here. They are the surplus country, that their exports to the U.S. are 5 times our exports to China. So they can raise their tariffs, but so what?
Trump wants to end the Chinese military, and that's why he has hit back. Today, President Trump just announced that he's pausing the tariff on every single country but China. China is getting hit with 125% tariff unless CCP comes to the negotiating table and negotiates a fair deal. A tariff this high means that basically any trade between two countries would most likely disappear. And as we have covered before, this will hurt China way more than it will hurt the United States, because China exports 5 times more goods to the United States than we do to China, and that's why they are in the weaker position. As if this wasn't bad enough for the CCP, it seems that other major powers like India and EU are siding with the United States and calling out China for its bullying behavior. Clearly, it was a hectic day with a lot of back and forth between a lot of countries. So let's go over exactly what happened and why EU and India are turning against China too. Starting with President Trump's announcement.
As you all know, the president just put out a statement announcing an additional tariff on China. The tariff on China will now go up to 125% because China imprudently decided to retaliate against the United States. And as I said at the podium yesterday, when you punch at the United States of America, President Trump is going to punch back harder.
This was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along. And that you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors, and we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate, things will turn out well.
I'm honored to have done it. And, look, nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate.
So it all started when Trump put out this tweet. This was the first announcement that US will be taking tariffs off on every single country except China. This was his statement. Based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world markets, I'm hereby raising the tariff charged to China by the United States of America to 125%, effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called the United States, including Department of Commerce, Treasury, and USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and these countries have not, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States, I have authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So, what this means? Pretty much the whole chart that Trump showed about every country getting some kind of tariff based on the trade deficit, that's not gonna apply anymore to any country. Every other country other than China is gonna have a 10% tariff. So this cancels out pretty much any other tariff that President Trump has announced so far. And I know it's been a hectic last few days, or I guess last few weeks, so I want to clarify one more time. As of now, every other country other than China and Venezuela only have a 25% tariff on steel, aluminum, auto, and other goods from Canada, Mexico. So 25% tariff on that and 10% tariff on every other thing. A lot better than what we had just a few days ago on last Thursday. But the Chinese tariffs are very high now, so let's go over how we got here exactly. First, we got two different 10% tariffs on China back in February and March respectively for the fentanyl trade. China is the country that's sending all the precursor chemicals to countries like Mexico and Canada, and then the fentanyl gets made in those countries and smuggled into the United States. That's why China was hit with 20% tariff 2 months ago. Then last Thursday, when President Trump announced his reciprocal tariffs on all countries around the world, he slapped China with a 34% tariff for all the sketchy stuff they do with world trade. Then China retaliated with their own 34% tariff. So in return, President Trump gave China a 1-day deadline to remove their tariff or get hit with 50% extra tariff. So this would be on top of everything. China did not remove their tariff, so China got hit with another 50%, which brings the total to 104%. Now at this point, China retaliated with their own 50% tariff, and that's what brings us to yesterday when President Trump announced that China will be getting hit with a total of 125% tariff. So this includes everything. This is not on top of the previous tariffs that we talked about. This is a one number that applies to all the trade from China. In return, we haven't heard from China as of right now, but China has said that they will fight till the end. So the obvious question arises, why is President Trump targeting China? Now that's something we've been covering on this channel for a long time, but in case you're new, here's the quick TLDR. Here's a quick brief.
104% tariffs on China are not enough. I'm advocating 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology, they steal it, they manufacture it, and sell it back here. Never has an administration.
400% tariffs? What would that look like?
Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field. This is not about tariffs anymore. Nobody has taken on China yet, not the Europeans, no administration for decades. As someone who actually does business there, I've had enough. I speak for millions of Americans who have IP that have been stolen by the Chinese. I have nothing against the Chinese people. They brought great literacy, art, and tech to the world. The government cheats and steals, and finally, an administration, you may not like Trump, you may not like his style or his rhetoric, finally, an administration that puts up and says enough. 400% tariffs tomorrow morning. He'll tell you why. Xi can only stay the supreme leader if people are employed. If we wipe out any business there, because we are still 39% of all consumables on Earth and 25% of the world's GDP, America is the #1 economy on Earth with all the cards. We will not have that forever. It's time to squeeze Chinese heads into the wall now.
It doesn't just stop there. Now China is saying that US is breaking the rule of law. US is breaking the rules set out by the World Trade Organization. But China has been one of the biggest rule breaker of the World Trade Organization ever since it became part of that organization. China doesn't practice free trade. They practice something called mercantilism. What that really means is China wants access to every single country's market, so Chinese companies can sell their products overseas. But China does not want to return the favor. They don't want foreign companies coming into China and selling foreign products. That's why Chinese market is walled off. If you want to sell in China, you need to partner with a Chinese company. Give them 49%, 51% of your company. Tell them exactly how to make your product, and that's the only way you can get access to China. Even then, many big US companies are banned in China. YouTube is banned. This video is banned. Facebook is banned. Instagram banned. The list just goes on and on. And the countries, the American countries that do have access to the Chinese market, they get their IP stolen, as you guys just heard. Then we have the Chinese companies using the government money, ramp up their production, steal IPs from American companies, and get so big that they start exporting their productions overseas. You see what's happening. China brought in Tesla. China brought in Elon Musk by giving him free money, zero interest loan, free land, all that so Elon Musk would build an EV factory in China. And now BYD has stolen everything Tesla does and has become better using free money that that government is giving out. Now, BYD sells 10 times more cars than Tesla ever did. Unfortunately for China though, it's not just the US that's waking up to China's bullying tactics. It's the whole world. Here we have EU commissioners, president, EU leadership calling out China for its unfair practices. Let's watch.
What is clear is that China is the key enabler of Russia's war. Without Chinese support, Russia wouldn't be able to wage the war in the amount that they are waging this. So we see that 80% of the dual-use goods are actually entering Russia via China. We also see the North Korean troops present in Ukraine and the military equipment coming from North Korea to Ukraine to Russia and to fight the war against Ukraine. So it's clearly that if China would want to really stop the support, then it would have an impact.
Now, just yesterday we covered how Chinese troops were just arrested in Ukraine fighting for Russia. On top of that, why do you think that Houthis are attacking every single ship in the Red Sea, but they never touch Chinese and Russian ships? Because these countries are helping the Houthis cause havoc in the world trade, all the while protecting Russian ships and Chinese ships so they can continue their free trade, or what they like to call free trade, benefit from the world while not returning any favor that the World Trade Organization asked of its members. It was a mistake to bring China into the World Trade Organization, and now we're paying the price for that mistake. Here we have India's Commerce Minister, echoing the same sentiments that President Trump brought up today. Let's listen.
The world accepted China as a member of the WTO. Many parts of the world were convinced that China will reform itself. China will transform its processes, will bring transparency to their economy, will work on fair terms in the global economy, and that being a large economy, an emerging economy, an economy growing by leaps and bounds. And we've seen that growth over the last 25, 30 years, almost relentless growth to become the second largest economy in the world. But what everybody closed their eyes to was that this growth was fueled by unfair trade practices. This growth happened at the cost of fair play. This growth had its foundation on every action which, in the rules of the game, would be considered improper, and the result of those actions caused a situation where I think large parts of the world got carried into the narrative of low-cost manufacturing, low-cost goods coming from one particular geography, but did not realize the long-term impact that it would have at the global stage.
Now, this is the exact reason why we've been calling for all this time, and not just us, many people around the world were calling that we shouldn't be tariffing our allies. We shouldn't be punishing the allies because we're gonna need them if there's ever a war or even a trade war with China. At the end of the day, US is a strong, rich country, but with allies, we are even stronger. And of course, that's not to say that we cannot renegotiate trade deals with our allies. At the end of the day, we don't want to be getting taken advantage of, but we can do that without offending or hurting our relationships with all these countries who have been in our corner from the beginning. The two countries I'm really talking about are Canada and Mexico. It makes good geopolitical sense to isolate China, onshore high-end production to the United States, and shift low-end production to friendly nations such as Mexico, which can become America's workshop. Now, one of the most interesting stories that's coming out of this whole Trump making a U-turn on tariffs on the allies is the story about Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent and JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon. Apparently, both of these people had very, very heavy influence on President Trump for his decision to reverse course on tariffs on allies and focus solely on China. But before we get to that story, I do want to show you guys this clip of Jamie Dimon explaining that we definitely need to rebalance trade with countries like China and even Russia because they have made it clear that they want to get rid of this order the United States has created. So we definitely don't want to be dependent on countries that are basically calling for the fall of the United States while also getting together with our allies, because at the end of the day, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea apparently are getting closer and closer together, and to counteract that block, we need our allies. Here's the clip.
China and Russia have made it clear they want to kind of dismantle the post-World War II system, and I think the goal of all this trade stuff should be to make Europe and our trading partners, Japan, Korea, Philippines, stronger, not weaker, bring them closer as we build up our military. And any trade that protects military, that we should definitely do. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes about, as you know, pharmaceuticals, shipping, pharmaceutical ingredients, penicillin.
That we're so reliant on China for all of this stuff.
We can't rely on any potential adversary for things we need for our military. And so, there I'm quite sympathetic. That we should do. That's absolutely paramount. But the point about national security is economic security, national security are almost directly related in the long run. Hopefully when these wars get resolved, and I hope in the interest of Ukraine, where they have sovereignty when it's over, and the interest of Israel, where not being constantly attacked by terrorists on three sides, you need to keep the economic alliance together. I think it would be in Russia's and North Korea's, Iran's, and China's interest to fragment the Western world. And I think that would be the biggest long-term mistake. And I'm talking about over 30 or 40 years. I don't want to read the book about how the West was lost.
Exactly as he said. We don't want to be fighting amongst each other because that gives an opening to China to break apart the partnership and take advantage of a world where the Western world isn't united. And that's exactly when dictators like Xi and dictators like Putin will thrive. Now, this is where I want to bring you guys' attention to how this whole thing played out. What made President Trump change his mind? And Wall Street Journal did a great play-by-play breakdown basically, so let's look at that. So the article is titled "Why Trump Blinked on Tariffs Just Hours After They Went into Effect." I guess more specifically why he blinked on tariffs against allies. And let's get into the details. The president said that the reaction to tariffs was getting a bit yippy, like a nervous athlete unable to perform, and he relied on his instincts to change course as he watched the bond market tank and listened to business leaders including JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon express fears of recession. Now pause right there, I do want to share an interesting point. Jamie Dimon is clearly a very well-respected person in the finance industry, and on top of that, I would say he's right up there almost in terms of the respect he has from his peers alongside Warren Buffett. Like, he's right up there with Warren Buffett. Now, he specifically picked Fox News Business to go on there because he knew President Trump watches it. So the clip we just saw, that happened in the morning, and after a few hours, we saw President cut the tariff. Now, it wasn't just Jamie Dimon who changed President's mind. It was also Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Bessent flew down Sunday to Florida and afterward was authorized to make comments publicly about deals, which heartened many people close to Trump who believed the Treasury Secretary could find an exit ramp. When the two men returned to Washington together Sunday on Air Force One, Bessent encouraged Trump to focus on negotiations, according to a person familiar with the conversation. Now, along with all this, Trump also listened to many CEOs who were basically complaining about the tariffs, and even some governors who were saying that their states were getting destroyed because of business that was halting due to the uncertainty relating to the tariffs. After listening to all this, it seems President Trump made his mind on Wednesday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon, we got that tweet as a statement saying that tariffs have been paused. Then again, it is a 90-day pause, and 90 days is supposed to give time for every country to negotiate some kind of deal, but I get a feeling we may get some of the tariffs news back again once the 90-day period is over. But for now, the complete focus is China and figuring out how to deal with China's subsidies, how to deal with China's trade barriers, how to deal with China devaluing their own currency to counteract the tariffs, to counteract everything other countries are doing. Now, another important point that came out today is that Scott Bessent is the lead negotiator with most of the countries that are coming in to negotiate a trade deal. So it's important for us to know what his thoughts are relating to tariff, relating to national security, and relating to China. Here's a clip where he shares a little bit about how he thinks of all this.
Maria, I think it's unfortunate that the Chinese actually don't want to come and negotiate because they are the worst offenders in the international trading system. They have the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and I can tell you that this escalation is a loser for them. That they have some very smart, the economists, the academicians, technocrats within their bureaucracy, and they would be telling the leadership that we do not have the edge here. They are the surplus country. Their exports to the U.S. are 5 times our exports to China. So they can raise their tariffs, but so what? In terms of escalation, unfortunately, the biggest offender in the global trading system is China, and they're the only country who's escalated. And I can tell the rest of the world that I'm not sure whether it was the Prime Minister or the Economic Minister in Spain, made some comments this morning. Oh, well, maybe we should align ourselves more with China. That would be cutting your own throat, because I can tell you that these Chinese exports that the U.S. tariff wall is going to keep out, that China, for all of you who can remember that Disney movie of the brooms carrying the buckets of water, that is the Chinese business model. It never stops. They just keep producing and producing and dumping, and it's going somewhere. And I think, Rob, at the end of the day, that we can probably reach a deal with our allies, with the other countries that have been long-term. They've been good military allies, not perfect economic allies, and then we can approach China as a group.
Bessent this morning also said that we could look at Chinese stocks getting removed from US exchanges. And in fact, this should have been done way earlier, because Chinese stocks don't follow the same laws as US stocks or US companies. CCP says that US regulators are not allowed to audit Chinese companies. That means we don't exactly know what's going on under the hood in these big companies like Alibaba, Temu, and all these other companies that are public in the US market. And we can't really trust the Chinese regulators, because after all, we have to remember, it was the Chinese regulators who let Evergrande get so big, all the while their accounting was pure shit. There was no better word for it. Evergrande was using buildings that weren't even built. That means they need to spend tens of millions of dollars to build a building, but they were using the final value of the building that wasn't even built to take out more loans from Chinese banks and then use that loans to buy more land to start the construction on this imaginary building, and then they would claim that building as completed and then take out more loan. It was basically a pyramid scheme to scam the Chinese investors. It was a pyramid scheme to scam all the bondholders that are overseas, including in the United States. All the while, Chinese regulators let this slide for decades and decades. So clearly, we cannot trust them. This is the big guns right here. The US has allowed the CCP to block audits, as I said earlier. Chinese companies basically play with a different set of rules than the US companies, while being on the same stock exchange and while taking American investors' monies. So we should be having them follow the same set of rules. If US actually starts enforcing these rules, it will be devastating to the CCP. YouTube just dropped a mind-boggling announcement. It is paying creators $64 million per day. Why? Well, because YouTube doesn't have enough creators right now. That's why you see videos on your homepage that have less than 1,000 views, like this one. Now, of course, that doesn't mean everyone should start a channel. But if you have ever wondered about starting a YouTube channel or a faceless channel, now is the perfect time. YouTube is paying creators millions every single day, and it's pushing newer and smaller channels now more than ever. But I'm sure you have many questions on how to start and grow a channel. I get these questions in my email all the time from some of you guys. That's why we have decided to put all of our YouTube advice into one training bootcamp for completely free. So if you're someone interested in starting your own YouTube channel, you can sign up for this bootcamp by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on your screen. This bootcamp is like a Zoom call, so it is limited to 100 people at a time. So be sure to sign up before it gets full.